How's it going, guys? Justin here. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about real estate and about a framework that I use and that's bothered me a little bit, mainly because I feel like people apply stuff they've seen on HGTV a little too much, or take it to heart a little too much, and don't do enough research. And if they did, they'd find out pretty quickly that it's not difficult to assess property in the real estate game. It's a very simple industry. There are a few tricks to it, but I think honestly, with the right information, it makes it a lot easier. And I guess so that you guys don't think I'm some crazy guy just ranting on the internet, I own a real estate brokerage in Austin. Actually, we're in Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, about to be in Houston. And not only that, I'm a second generation. My father's been doing it for 35 years. Been working with investment property and developments that entire time, pretty much. Anyways, what I did want to talk to you guys about is I guess it's a framework of how to try to quantify and evaluate property. I'm not gonna say it's the only way. I definitely know it works. Been doing the same thing for since I've been helping my dad in his properties since I was 16, and he's been doing it ever since as well. I think it's a very good framework for people to evaluate property, and I'm not the only person that talks about these things either. This is common knowledge. It's just I wanted to get something out there so that maybe to try to fight against the HGTV garbage of the world. And it's a pet peeve of mine, that how people contribute why or how something came about. When people evaluate businesses, a lot of times they use real estate as a benchmark. A property should be able to make X percent. Usually they talk about 10 cap. So a property should be able to return 10% of its value over a span of a year after everything nets out, right? If a business can do that, that's phenomenal. Especially in a market like we're in right now, this appreciated market in Austin and for Texas, for that matter, they may falsely attribute how or how it came about, like why they've done money because or did well. I think there's a lot of mistakes that happen, but just get covered because the market is appreciating so fast, and they just think it's them, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But how I evaluate it, that's not necessarily the case. And when the market turns, that's when we're really going to find out who might know a little better. Anyways, let's just jump right into it. One of the oldest that I know ways people have made money in the real estate game is cash flow. When I say cash flow, this is rent, obviously, residential, apartments, commercial, strip malls, office buildings, etc. I throw owner finance in there as well. When you're toting the note, you are definitely, instead of renting the property, you're renting the money, and it's actually a phenomenal business model. If you know about leverage and whatnot, we can talk about that some other time. But this is a very old business model. Works great. When you're not leveraging, it's very hard not to make money this way. And yeah, I think it gets overlooked. It's not as sexy as flipping houses and you know these guys making 30, 40, 50, maybe even and on bigger properties 50, 120 grand, over the span of 3 months. But it's definitely reliable. When if you can purchase it at that rate, anyways. But yeah, anyways, the kind of leading into the other one I was talking about earlier is flipping property, and this is kind of one of my pet peeves. People, when in an appreciating market, if there was no market appreciation, they didn't even understand that that's occurring, that market appreciation is occurring. They just think, oh, I flipped this house, I made money, and right now they're never going to know. They just know that they might have broken even or they made a little bit of money, but they bought at the height of the market at that present time, and but just because of how insane the market is, it might have appreciated 20%, so they'll net, after expenses, they'll still net a little bit of money at the end. Or and another pet peeve is when I hear some people quoting numbers, you can already tell that they're quoting gross numbers, and so let's say a property appreciates 10%, they bought it at the top of the market. and they, after paying all their expenses, they don't make any money, and the only money they're getting back is their what they've paid down in principal, and whatever. They just need to brag, I guess. People just need to be in the limelight for a little bit. But kind of going over this equity capture, this is obviously what most people call house flipping. It's a real simple equation. You want to evaluate what the market value of the property is after you fix it, and a lot of times it's referred to in at least in wholesaler investor circles as the after repair value. And you want to try to figure out all expenses, your purchase price, repair costs, everything, foundation, cosmetics, upgrades, remodel, everything in between, and along with your transactional costs, what you're paying to float the note if you're purchasing it with hard money, et cetera, et cetera. The difference between what all your expenses are and what that value is, that's basically what your equity is. And the better at estimating what your expenses are going to be, and the better at estimating what the after repair value is going to be, that's generally, if you got a knack for doing those things, that's what's going to help you make money flipping property. So so there's I come across a lot of newbie flippers, investors, and I guess they screw up on this part, and this is one of the most important parts. And if they do make money, a lot of times it was because of an appreciating market. And honestly, that's probably the safest place to do it, is in a market like Austin, where it's just 10% over year, average 10%. There's some neighborhoods I remember there was a couple neighborhoods where it was just a working class neighborhood 5 years ago. Blue collar crap was selling for $100,000 a pop, for a little simple 1,000 square foot, 3 bedroom, 1.5 bath. Now that same exact house is going for 180. It's insane. 3 5 years. There's a couple other places where it's even crazier, where in the higher neighborhoods, going from like where it started at 150, 180, jumping up to 280. And so it's just mind-boggling, and it's not going to continue forever. On that note, what I'm describing of this market appreciation, that's the third thing that I want to talk about. So this is what people mix up with equity capture a little too many times, and you need to treat them differently, because you can calculate equity capture. Market appreciation is a fuzzier number. It's because it's in the future. You're trying to predict. This is a number that you can't nail down necessarily. I mean, if you're in Austin, you have a decent idea it's going to go up. But there's things like, what if the Federal Reserve suddenly decides, oh, we're going to go from, just giving away money to the local banks for 0% to let's just jack it up 4%. All of a sudden, half the market disappears overnight. That happens. That happened they changed the whole financing structure back in 2007, 2008. Or in safe law, it just changed the game, and people couldn't buy property. And that kind of those types of things change markets, fundamentally change markets, and you can't nail it down as well. So going back, market appreciation is just when property values increase over time because of economic market factors. It's not present value, and again, I think that's a fundamental distinction people need to make. And it's relatively hard to calculate, and some people can, if they have some kind of insider scoop of they're putting these Section 8 apartments right on the corner of X and X, you can sometimes reliably estimate that neighborhood's going to go down, and so you can kind of short neighborhoods that way. But and there's other instances, but I think this is a little more difficult to do. When you're dealing with larger aggregates, you can definitely deal with aggregate trends, and that's when it becomes a little more useful. But for a single-family home in a specific neighborhood, a little tougher to do. If you're doing this over 1,000 houses in a specific neighborhood market, you can, I think, get a more accurate view of what's going to happen on aggregate, but not in a specific situation, just because of the variation. There are other kind of important factors between these three things, and in addition to that, you can do a combination of these three things. Right now, I have a little property in Pflugerville that we're renting out, and so we're getting a cash flow off of this. And not only that, I purchased it on equity, so I did capture some equity. It's on paper though. I haven't realized that equity capture quite yet, but I am definitely realizing a positive cash flow on top of the mortgage that I'm paying on top of it. And In addition to that, because of over time, the neighborhood's actually appreciating. The neighborhood's getting a little bit nicer, and so on top of the equity capture, I am capturing some market appreciation. And depending on, actually, I might even decide to dump it sooner than later because of depending on what the Fed does. I'm kind of scared that that might change what the market looks like. But honestly, Austin's such a booming market. I think it'll be fine. But yeah. So you can intertwine them, but I think it's important that you need to identify these three categories when evaluating property. So these other factors I was talking about, by the way, are your tax advantages. So uh, getting to depreciation tax credits, deferring taxes on your 1031 exchanges, leverage and financing. So a lot of times when you leverage, when you buy with a mortgage, that's leveraging, that's financing, and it can become very, very useful in a lot of situations. One of the downsides, though, and I think this doesn't get explained very well in some of the other books that talk about cash flow and financing. A great book, though, by the way, is Kiyosaki. I mean, he's a sales guy and it comes off really slimy, but I think there's still some good content in there, and I think it's a great spot for people to start if they want to get into this. And just spending a couple hours on the internet, you're going to find a ton of information, anyways. But anyways, he talks about how he calls it cash on cash return. And I think that's a good word to use to describe what your net returns on and what you actually put in, physically put in, and what you actually take out. And that's a really important metric in figuring out what you actually make and how much you actually need to put into it. Another thing people kind of forget, and I put an asterisk on here, is you pay your principal down over time too with the cash flow, and I honestly just kind of throw this into the cash flow category, but some people distinguish this differently. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. For me, the reason why I really wanted to make this was mainly because of market appreciation and equity capture. People just mix those two together so much, and it just bothers the hell out of me. And I wanted to put something out there that tries to describe that, and maybe I'll post some more videos. If you guys did find this interesting, let me know. And if you have any other ideas of what you think you'd like to hear about, let me know, and I can maybe put something together for you guys. Anyways, thanks.